The Battle of Santa Rosa Island was a nighttime endeavor to destroy this camp. A lot of people think it was for General Bragg was trying to capture Fort Pickens. The whole time he was here, he tried to capture Fort Pickens, but he knew as a professional soldier it could not be done. What happened is Florida seceded January the 10th, 1861, and immediately the state forces seized the Navy Yard, the $1 million dry dock, all the infrastructure around the bay, including Fort Barrancas and Fort McRae and the lighthouse. So they had everything, and to the credit of a Union colonel by the name of Adam Slimmer, he saw what was coming on January the 8th, and when there was an attack at Fort Barrancas in which his sentries fired some shots and ran off some Southern partisans, which is said to be the first shots fired in defense of the Union, he very quickly mobilized his group and led them across the bay very quietly and occupied Fort Pickens. With his occupation of Fort Pickens meant that the Union would hold that fort throughout the entire war. And so on October the 9th, 1861, they took about 1,100 troops from the Navy Yard, brought them to Pensacola, and they boarded vessels, and they went down the edge of the island. They went ashore, and it was a night raid, and they put a white band around their left arms in order to identify themselves as opposed to the enemy. And they marched toward the camp, and they overran the camp. They caught them asleep, is what they did. Overran the camp, and took some prisoners and killed a few. And they, as the Southerners were prone to do in those days, they stopped and plundered the camp, looking for loot and all that. By this time, the alarm had been sounded at Fort Pickens, and they sent a unit that way toward the camp. And by this time, there was a little skirmish with the troops from the fort, and the Confederates could be beginning to fall back a little bit. Finally, Colonel Anderson, who was a commander of the unit, realized his position was untenable. He went back to his boats, and they had a heck of a time getting them off the shore. They got word, some scout told them that a gunship was coming around the island from Fort Pickens. So they hustled back to the boats and went back to Pensacola and escaped with there were about 14 killed on each side, 18 on one side, 13 on the other. But the Battle of Santa Rosa Island is an interesting nighttime junket in that these people were not prepared. They never had any training for nighttime. Neither had the Union. They didn't know how to combat that, and it was very poorly executed on the part of both. It was pretty brave of the Southerners to think that 1,100 men might march to that fort and try to take it, but as it turns out, they had to turn tail and run.